Here we go with the next set of notes in the Chemistry of Life series, this one on DNA. A little bit more on DNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, so the Na is right there in the name. Deoxyribo comes from the type of sugar that it's made of, deoxyribose. And so again, we see that nucleotide, you've got your phosphate, you've got your deoxyribose sugar, and you've got that base. And DNA has the characteristic double helix shape. That's the most important thing, having that double helix. Within that DNA, within the nitrogen base that you just saw, you have 4 different options of nitrogen bases. Right? There's 4 bases in DNA. There's the pyrimidines, which are a chemical called cytosine or a chemical called thymine. Right? These are right here, cytosine and thymine. And these guys are a single ring structure. Okay. There's also another type of pyrimidine called uracil, which we're not going to worry about for DNA. Right? Not in DNA, it's only going to be in RNA, which we'll see a little bit later. Then your other option, of course, being the purines, which are adenine and guanine. Adenine and guanine, and these guys are both double rings. Right, so those are those 4 different options of things that can go in this base segment. All the other nucleotides are always going to have the phosphate, they're always going to have the deoxyribose, but this base thing can either be a C, a T, an A, or a G. So all this stuff goes together to form that double helix shape. The DNA double helix is made up of a sugar and a phosphate backbone. So you can see here the phosphate and you got the sugar. Those guys are all connected together, making up the backbone of the DNA. And then the bases are like the rungs of the ladder. So you got the bases on the inside there, as if you were to uncoil it, it would look like a ladder. Really, really super important thing is the way that these bases pair together. They pair in what are called complementary pairs. They complement each other. A always pairs with T, adenine always pairs with thymine, and cytosine always pairs with guanine. And that has to do with their chemical structure. If you look, you got thymine in red right here, and adenine in blue. You got a single ring paired with a double ring. Single ring paired with a double ring. Single, double. Single, double. Single, double. You never have a double and a double, right? That would be like having a ladder where some of the rungs are 1 foot apart and some of the rungs are 2 feet apart. That just wouldn't work. So you have to have a single paired with a double. And if you notice that between these two, the A and the T, you always have 2 hydrogen bonds, versus the C and the G, you have 3 hydrogen bonds. So the way they work, it always chemically makes sense for them to go A paired with T, A paired with T, C paired with G. Always, always, always. When you talk about DNA, A pairs with T, C pairs with G. The structure of DNA was actually only discovered relatively recently. We've known about DNA since like the 1800s. I think that's when DNA was first isolated. But in the 40s and 50s, there was kind of a race going on to try to figure out what DNA actually looked like. And it was basically first discovered by 2 guys named James Watson and Francis Crick in 1953. So they're the ones that get all the credit for it. But kind of one of the curious stories in biology, or in science, I guess, in general, is they actually had a lot of help from this woman here, Rosalind Franklin. And she had taken these x-ray pictures, like this guy here, that kind of gave them the clue, kind of said, oh, hey, wait a minute, what if we try a double helix shape? And unfortunately, as was a lot of the case in those times, the women in science weren't given all their credit, and when it came time to give out the Nobel Prize, she wasn't given any credit at all. She'd actually died by then. She had gotten cancer probably from working with x-rays so much, they didn't really know a lot about them. They didn't realize they caused cancer back in that day. So kind of an unfortunate story, but she's definitely more widely recognized for getting credit for that now. In fact, she was just given a Google Doodle on July 25th, 2013 in honor of what would have been her 93rd birthday, in honor of her contribution to science, which I think is kind of cool that she's being recognized a little bit more nowadays. And then in addition to DNA, there's also RNA, which stands for ribonucleic acid, because just like DNA, it's made of sugar, which is called ribose instead of deoxyribose, and then the phosphate backbone, so phosphate and ribose. And then it has pretty much the same bases with a couple little changes, as adenine and guanine and cytosine, just like DNA does, but instead of thymine, it has a base called uracil. So similar to DNA, C still pairs with G, but in this case, an A on DNA is going to pair with a U on RNA. So anytime there's an A on DNA, it's going to pair with a U. And you see over here you've got U's instead of T's. And that pretty much wraps up our tour of the chemistry of life, the macromolecules and water, and how all that works to help keep our bodies going.